Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Testing Psychologist podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Sharp, licensed psychologist, group practice owner, and private practice coach. Many of y'all know that I have been using therapy notes as our practice EHR for over 10 years now. I've looked at others, and I just keep coming back to therapy notes because they do it all. If you're interested in an EHR for your practice, you can get 2 free months of therapy notes by going to thetestingpsychologist.com/therapy notes and enter the code TESTING. This episode is brought to you by PAR. The new PAR training platform is now available and is the new home for PAR talks, webinars, as well as on-demand learning and product training. Learn more at parinc.com/resources/PAR-training. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to another business episode. Today, my guest is talking about positive leadership with me. My guest is Nicole McCance. She is a psychologist, retired, turned business coach for therapists scaling to a group practice. She expanded her private practice to 55 therapists and multiple 7 figures in 3 years. With toddler twins at home, no easy feat. Nicole sold her clinic in the 4th year and then retired as a psychologist in her 5th year. She now teaches therapists and mental health professionals how to help more people, make more money, and have more freedom following her proven method. So part of that method is positive leadership. So we are talking about that today. And as you all know, if you run a practice of any size, leadership is one of the most challenging aspects of growing a practice. So we were not taught how to run a business in grad school, and we certainly weren't taught how to be an actual leader of that business. So Nicole and I talk about her framework for positive leadership, which she takes as kind of a marriage between positive parenting and positive psychology. It is a clearly defined 4-step process, like many of her approaches, and it's meant to help us engage in a positive leadership style. So we talk through the approach and many other things during the conversation. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this conversation about positive leadership with Nicole McCance. Nicole, hey, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, so happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Yeah, I'm excited to be talking with you. You know, you are all over social media, so I felt honored and sort of starstruck when you reached out to connect.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Ads do work,
grateful.
guys. That's amazing.
They really do. Yeah. I'm like, oh, good example. That's a whole other conversation of how do you use Instagram to promote a mental health business, but we'll save that maybe for another day. Today, we are talking about positive leadership in a practice, which I am very intrigued about. So I'll start with a question that I always start with folks, which is, you know, of all the things that you could care about and focus on and spend time and energy on, why positive leadership?
Yeah. Maybe I'll start with who I am because it ties into the answer to your question. So
Great.
I'm a psychologist who's retired, and just saying that out loud still surprises me. You know, I was in private practice for 15 years and really truly knew in my soul that I was born to do this and never thought I would ever do anything else. And then I became pregnant with twins and I just couldn't work more. I was working all the time, evenings and weekends. I'm like, how do I be a new mom and work like evenings and weekends? How does that work? And that's when I scaled into a group. And this was when they were 2, because I was just so sick of watching them, like mommy pulls in and they're like going to bed a half an hour later. So I was able to scale in 3 years to 55 therapists, built a big practice. And then my most exciting thing is it was, of course, automated. And then a psychiatrist wanted to buy it. So here I am now, retired, built and sold a group practice, and now a business coach, as you know. And so here's the answer to your question. In order to scale, you need to influence people. In order to scale, you need a team, a tribe around you, right? Like by definition, you can't just scale with just you. That's why I did it. We didn't just not learn business in graduate school. We also did not, I mean, you and I have talked about this, learn a thing about being a leader or a boss. So that's why that's important.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's super important. It's I think all about relationships. I mean, you can't do anything without relationships with people and how you
Yeah.
influence and lead. And it's a really challenging role to play.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
On top of all the other hats, right? Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. So tell me about positive leadership. I mean, let's start with a working definition and how you might
Yeah.
describe this to folks.
Yeah, and how I kind of came up to it with it. So there was members in my coaching program and they would say, "Okay, I understand, Nicole, you're helping me build an automated group practice. That's great. Thanks for the manuals. I have the SOPs. I have it all streamlined. This is amazing. You taught me that. But wait, they're not doing the things. I have the processes, but they're not actually doing the things." And it was one coaching call and she said, "Okay, he's leaving his room messy all the time and it's upsetting the next therapist because they share a room, right? Real problem. This happened in my clinic too." So her next question led me to talk about this. She said, "Do I just write him up?" And in my head, I was like, oh, I feel like we need to talk about leadership because that's not going to work. And it got me delving into, I love positive parenting, the
Mm,
dynamic of positive parenting. There's really no power differential choices. And I love positive psychology. So to me, that's where positive leadership comes from.
mhm.
That the definition in my head is that people want to do good. They do. They want to please you. They want to they want a clean room. Who doesn't? But it's like, how do we tie into and influence them and motivate them to get to the same goal?
Sure, sure. So that's a great example, it sounds like, from your community. I would imagine you had some experiences yourself in your practice where positive leadership qualities either could have come in handy or did come in handy. Can you think of anything off the top of your head, like some of the challenging moment or a couple of the more challenging moments when this popped up for you?
I love the messy room example. That's why I use it because I had it. There was somebody in the clinic who he would just leave everything everywhere, like even his
Hmm.
coffee, you know? And
Hmm.
to me, I'm a very like tidy, kind of structured
Hmm.
person. So my brain didn't understand that. And at the beginning, instinctually, we're so busy as owners that I just
Hmm.
wanted to like send a quick message and it would be fixed and it wasn't. So this is why I have like a 4-step kind of framework that we'll go over that I learned
Oh.
that, oh, okay, well, when I do these 4 steps, I get to the goal. And when I don't get to the goal.
Hmm. Hmm. That is a good example. It's one of those little things that we don't really think about, but I feel like that happens 1,000 times a day in different ways, whether it's the messy
Right.
room or whatever, leaving the cup in the sink or whatever it may be.
Yes,
But it's
exactly.
like, how do you deal with this as a leader? It's not like the person is sleeping with their client or verbally abusive to their coworkers, but it's still a
Right.
problem you have to
Mhm.
solve. Yeah.
It really is. And so even think about kids. Punishment does work, but short term, right? That's how we were raised, or I was raised in the 1980s, like very like I'm the parent, but it just doesn't work long term as a boss, of course. So
Yeah.
I found that I can get into the what I learned, like the 4 steps at work if you want.
Yeah, yeah. Let's bridge to that. Yeah.
Okay. So jumping on a call face to face, people take it a bit more seriously when their boss is the leader's like, hey, and not in a bad boy kind of way, but kind of like, hey, listen, I just wanted to connect. So, number one is showing up curious. Curious. The other person won't be defensive if you're curious and maybe confused, like, hey, I know this is in our manual about cleaning at the end of the shift, but I'm just, a bit curious. Like, tell me a little bit because I've noticed this keeps happening. Tell me more. And it disarms the conversation, I believe, when you show up curious
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree.
and
Right?
they want to
People,
fill in the gaps, right?
yeah, yeah. I think people do like asking or being asked questions rather than being
Exactly.
told things. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So right away, that disarms the power differential in some ways. And then, secondly, and this is my favorite part, get to the resistance. They know what to do. They were trained, they read a manual, they may even signed an employee handbook. They know what to do. They're a smart person. We're lucky that we work with professionals, right? But there's something in the way. And what is the resistance? So, a good example is some of my members will bump up against their therapist not communicating the 24-hour cancellation policy in session
Hmm.
or not getting the credit card because that feels weird. And the resistance underneath is actually just, ugh, I don't love having money conversations with the clients. And then boom, we got to the resistance. Let me support you. Let's come up with something, right? So
Mhm.
in this case, messy room, the resistance could be a few things. What if this is a sign of burnout? What
Mhm.
if stuff all over the desk and he leaves actually tells me, because I showed up curious, he tells me, you know what? I'm so glad you asked. I have a newborn at home. And here I am just not asking the questions. If I didn't show up
Mhm.
curious, I wouldn't have known that maybe he would have left because he would have burnt out and I wasn't paying attention.
Right, right. Well, I think that, yeah, that underlying message or idea and being curious too, it gives people the benefit of the doubt. I think it's
Yeah,
real easy to like one of my colleagues in my accountability group, she says like you get wrapped up in your story. Like we get wrapped up in the story.
so
Like you've already
true.
created a story for him of why the office is messy. And it's never good, at least for me.
Yes,
It's like
yes.
when people cut you off in traffic, it's never a good reason. You don't, so when you come in curious, it gives them the benefit of the doubt and you actually get to learn a little bit about what's going on in their life.
Yeah. And it disarms, like you're going in open, a bit more open. Or maybe he's not overwhelmed at home and burnt out. Maybe he has ADHD and he's just never told you. There's neurodiversity
Yeah.
and he doesn't see the cup. Like you see the cup, his brain does not see the cup. And you were open enough that he felt safe, keyword, psychological safety, the key to culture, that he felt safe enough to say, actually, I've been meaning to tell you. Boom, boom, boom. And now we've actually deepened the conversation and we can support him.
Hmm. Yes.
That's
Yes.
number two. The number three is coming up with a goal. Number four is like time frame. So goal, because here's the thing. We're not just going to show up curious and support them through the barrier, but because it still has to be get done, right? And so the
Yeah.
goal
Yeah.
is really key. And rather than sharing the goal, so the goal would be something like in the next 2 weeks, let's work together to meet the goal of clean room. Like, what is goal? Let's define it. And then timeline. But rather than you coming up with the goal, because that could be feel like you're telling me what to do, which some personalities don't love. I'm one of them, sadly.
Same. Yeah.
But have him come up with the goal because then it's a great idea. When they come up with a goal, it's a great idea. When you do it, it's bossy.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like this is one of those ideas that sounds amazing, right? I mean, we'd love to have other people come up with things and whatnot. I find that to be hard sometimes in reality. And I wonder if you have developed any strategies over the years to make that easier. I mean, it's not like we're trying to trick people necessarily, but I feel like there is an art to turning it back to them and letting it be their idea um, without it being obvious. You know what I mean? So I'm curious
Yeah,
how you approach that. Can we deepen that a bit?
for sure. So for me, honestly, was having a business coach because I forget
Hmm.
the frameworks when I was a clinic owner, I had a business coach, which is truly why I became one because I'm like, you need one.
Yeah.
But having like you said accountability partner, having that coaching, it's like, oh yes, okay, right. I'm going to come in with these frameworks. To me, I've really trained my brain to talk in questions because I know that
Mm.
it creates influence, talking
Hmm.
questions. So rather
Hmm.
than and it's collaborative. The
Hmm.
underlying sense is I know we'll get to where we're going faster if we link arms here and it's collaborative rather than me doing what I kind of secretly want to do, which is just be like, can you please do this? Thanks.
Of course. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I use this line with my kids sometimes, which is how can we tackle this? What do you think
Oh,
we
I
should
love
do?
that. There you
Yeah.
go.
Like
Yeah.
how do we
There's
solve
so
this
many
problem?
similarities between
Yeah.
clinic ownership and parenting, and not in a way that there are children at all, but there are just so many similarities, right? Because it's like there's the power differential, I want you to do this. Yeah.
Hmm. Well,
And I find we
yeah,
tend to parent how we lead.
I agree. I agree. And for me, I'm curious if this resonates with you, but for me, I've recognized over the years, it's definitely like, how do you respond when you don't feel in control? And what's your what's your reaction to that? Are you like clamping down and trying to like get more rigid and control it more? Or are you like opening
Yeah.
up and like collaborating? What do you do when you don't feel in control? I don't know if that,
Oh, I love that.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm a self-proclaimed control freak. If there was a
Mhm.
contest, I would win.
I don't know. I give you some
Yeah.
competition there, Nicole.
Yeah. So I think the business coach, that was the biggest thing for me is just like,
Mm,
just letting go, just learning that that actually gets you to where you're going faster. But it
mhm.
was like constant learning. Yeah.
Sure, sure. So step three, setting a goal, hopefully getting them enrolled in that process, like you said.
Yeah. They
And
said it.
right, right. And then number four, you said was time frame. Is that right?
Exactly. Timeline. So it's because I find I was talking to a member about this yesterday that she's like, I feel hopeless. It's just not happening. I'm sick of having the combo to the point that like it might be easier to let them go. And so when we talked about time frame, she's like, oh, I like that. The fact that like in 7 days, there'll be some sort of resolution. Either you do it or you don't. And then we talk about next steps. So I think timeline helps with anxiety.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think so. That sounds good. Yeah, I mean, that leads to another question for me, which is what do you do if this doesn't work? I mean, how many chances do you give people? How many times do you go through the cycle? How many goals do you set? And what do you do
Yeah.
when they're not reached? What's the other side of this? Let's take a break to hear from a featured partner. Y'all know that I love therapy notes, but I am not the only one. They have a 4.9 out of 5-star rating on trustpilot.com and Google, which makes them the number one rated electronic health record system available for mental health folks today. They make billing, scheduling, note taking, and telehealth all incredibly easy. They also offer custom forms that you can send through the portal. For all the prescribers out there, Therapy Notes is proudly offering e-prescribe as well. And maybe the most important thing for me is that they have live telephone support 7 days a week, so you can actually talk to a real person in a timely manner. If you're trying to switch from another EHR, the transition is incredibly easy. They'll import your demographic data free of charge, so you can get going right away. So if you're curious, or you want to switch, or you need a new EHR, try Therapy Notes for 2 months, absolutely free. You can go to thetestingpsychologist.com/therapy notes and enter the code testing. Again, totally free, no strings attached. Check it out and see why everyone is switching to Therapy Notes. I'm excited to tell you about PAR's all-new PAR training platform, an elevated online learning environment with everything you need in one place. This is the new home for PAR Talks webinars, many of which offer APA and NASP-approved CEs, and also houses on-demand learning tools and PAR product training resources. Best of all, it is free. Totally free. To learn more, visit parinc.com/resources/PAR-training. All right, let's get back to the podcast.
Your B players will bring down your A players. Even your C, hopefully you don't have C players, but your B and C players will bring down your A players. So holding on to somebody, especially if they're a toxic personality or just not a good fit or kind of disrespectful, they're just not respecting you, like that's person that's kind of speaking up in a rude way in the meetings, like those got to go and fast because that's culture cancer and it will spread. Now, the people
100%.
that's a bit harder though with those that like they're actually a good therapist, Nicole, and she's lovely. She just doesn't do her notes or she
Yeah.
doesn't sign her notes. Those are harder because it's like, I think that's personal. But in the end, I say, is it keeping you up at night? Is it costing you anything? Money, time, energy. And if it is not worth it. You created this to surround yourself with great energy. Like that's why you went into group practice. Don't be that person that has the job that they hate. You're the boss,
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Don't be that person that has the job that they hate.
which is millions of people in this very moment.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. We get wrapped up in owning a practice and leadership. And yeah, it's easy to forget that we have some choice in the process.
Yes,
Yeah,
100%. Yes. Isn't that empowering? I think we need to
it
write
is
that down
empowering.
on our mirror though, so we remember every day.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? You are choosing this. You are choosing this.
Yes.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I'm maybe bridging a little too far here, but it sounds like you're kind of saying, hey, if you go through this process and the person does not meet the goal within the time frame, then it might be time to move toward a termination or
Yeah.
a separation, whatever you might call it, or
Yeah.
giving them the opportunity to work in a place that's a better fit
You
is
got
another
it.
way to frame it.
Exactly. And that, doesn't that feel better? Like to be like, you know what? They're just not a fit here. Don't feel bad for them. They will thrive. It's just not here.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. I
Can
think
I
that makes
just say
sense.
something? Because you had said something really powerful earlier that I think when something goes wrong, when something's not done, there's an error, things aren't flowing because we've worked so hard to create the structured practice. As humans, we have a bias, and that is we blame the other person. Okay. Almost always. There's a name for it. Is it
Yeah.
the attribution bias? No, but anyway, there's
Fundamental
a bunch.
attribution error.
There
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
go. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. So I would like you to ask yourself the next time you're frustrated, and that could be in 5 minutes, hopefully not that soon, but it could be in 5 days. Is this a people problem, a leader problem, or a systems problem? Okay.
Hmm.
People,
Hmm.
that's the one we always go first, leader or systems. And guess what? Pop quiz, Jeremy, which one it usually is? People, leader, or systems?
I'm going to say leader.
You know what? No, that's the good news.
Okay.
Thank God it's not us.
That's my
It,
self-deprecation coming in. I always
yeah,
blame myself. I'm like, this is my fault for not communicating appropriately.
yeah. You know what, though? That's a good leader to go to take responsibility first, though. It's the systems. There's
Is it?
usually there's like they weren't trained well, not onboarded well. The manual's not clear. You have a system for communicating, but if you go back and read that email, what you said in your head and they read was different. It's a
Hmm.
systems. And guess what? That's great news because we can put one in place and really work on it and things will be smoother. So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
love asking myself that every time. And then the second place I go, even though I want to go to them secretly, is I go to myself, leader. Okay, what did I do? Because that's empowering. I can change me.
Absolutely. That's such a good point. I think about the million things that happen in an office day to day, and at least in our office. And we joke with my leadership team, but it's like you almost really do need a policy for everything, right? Like simple
Everything.
thing, like it's a weird setup in our office. Like we have a sink in the waiting area, like a tiny sink, but
Hmm.
then we also have a sink in our kitchen area. And so, our thing is like, put your used cups in the sink. Well, I don't like them in the front sink. I want them in the back sink, but
For sure.
that wasn't written down anywhere. But of course, I would like look at the cups in the front sink and be like, oh my God, why are they putting the cups in the front sink? But
Yes. Systems
making it
problem.
super
There you go.
clear. Systems problem.
Exactly.
Yes.
Just one word, the word kitchen saved you. Kitchen, sink, right?
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
But it's just that idea, as leaders, we have to, I think it is incumbent upon us to define what we want and make sure people are aware of it. Because if they don't know what rule they're breaking, then it's almost unfair to
Exactly.
be upset with them.
Yeah. Now, for me, I love like my brain works in processes. So if you could train your brain, because mine is fully trained now, if an error happens, I always ask what system needs to be put in place for this. It happens
Hmm.
once, what system needs to be put in place? But on the Colby, which you and I have talked about before. So
Yeah.
Colby, my friends, is like a strength assessment, KOLBE. I'm high in process. So it is, I actually test people before I work with them because if they're low in process, it can be harder
Mm.
because
Hmm.
it's harder. They don't love structure, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
you need a structured clinic.
That's a that's a really interesting thing to talk about. So let's detour for a second. When do you give them the Colby in the interview process?
Yeah. So I have a 6-step hiring model. It's the last step. So let's say they go through all the steps. So they've been screened, interviewed, references, working interview, all the things. Then you've got your top two candidates, and you're like, oh gosh, I don't know. They're both so good. Top two, top three. The
Hmm.
Colby costs $55 American. So, don't give it to every person, of course, but your
Hmm.
top two candidates, then do not hire them until they do the Colby.
Hmm. Hmm. How do you
Yeah.
present it to them?
You know what? So I get asked this a lot because I also suggest other personality, like another the Big Five test
Hmm.
that actually happens way earlier. People love to find out about themselves. So I think it's just because our profession, they're always kind of excited. I'm going to pay for a test for you to learn about yourself. Does that interest you? And they're like, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And they know it's part of the hiring process, I assume.
I think that's really key. Yeah. So we have
Yeah,
HR experts in the program
yeah.
because I think, so we are allowed to use, we are allowed to use tests, strengths tests, and personality tests. Just we can't discriminate. It has to be tied to the role, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you share the results with them once it's done, whether you hire them or not, they get their profile and they get to
Yeah. So
learn
you
about
can create
themselves.
your clinic profile. So their results actually end up in your portal, which is great.
Hmm.
And then I'm pretty sure it's also, yeah, they're sent to them as well. And
Yeah.
it's amazing. Like they just love it. It comes with a little video. I remember
Hmm.
getting my Colby results and feeling so validated. So it's a cool experience, I think, for them.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. I thought about that for a long time, how to incorporate some kind of assessment in the
Right. Of
process,
course
of
you would.
course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That sounds good. I like that. I think that makes sense. I know some other practice owners who use, gosh, what is it? Predictive index, I think, is another one that some people really like. But I think
Nice.
there's something to that, that,
Oh, yeah.
when you find out the kind of person that works really well in your practice, why not try to duplicate that person and enhance the
Exactly.
chances they're going to do well? Yeah.
Yeah. This is a work marriage. Like, let's get them going through multiple steps before we say I do. Cause,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot to get out of that really. It's stressful when it ends. Let's prevent that.
Yeah, that's a great way to think of it. It is stressful. Okay. So this is good. This is good. The positive leadership approach makes a lot of sense. It seems like you've thought about this pretty deeply, I suppose. And I can, I can tell like you have steps and systems and protocols
Yeah.
and that kind
And
of thing. I
honestly,
think
a
that,
lot of it came to how I influence my kids. I have one kid,
ah,
Lucas, and he really doesn't like to be told what to do ever.
hmm
So I'm like, okay, how do I get him to do what I want him to do? Like his
hmm
homework and putting on his socks in the morning, brushing his teeth. And it really is, having him cut the choices and the goals, and it works. And I was like, oh, what if this works with adults too? And lo and
hmm
behold, it does.
Right, right. People like choices, I think, for sure,
Yeah. And to
for
feel
the most part.
empowered.
And to feel empowered. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So let's see. I mean, I think about the journey to get here, right? So it sounds like you hired a coach to help with this leadership development process. Um, should that be part of every leader's journey, in your opinion?
Yes, 100%. I
Yeah.
mean, for maybe people are born leaders. I was not one of them. You
Hmm.
know, it was hard to trust people. And by definition, if you don't trust people, you don't have a team. And that comes from my childhood, just people not being there for me. So I walked around my life being like, well, I did everything on my own up until this moment. And now I need to rely on other people. So because of that, business coaching was like I'm a different person, truly. It's like you can go to therapy, definitely, go to therapy too, because that's going to be the piece, like the CBT piece, catastrophizing, like work through that. I think you need two things, a therapist and a business coach. But the business coach was like therapy, really learning like, wow, I can trust other people and make a bigger difference here.
Yeah, yeah. How did you find your coach?
Oh my gosh, I went through a lot. None of them were therapists. And that was important to me, which is actually why I became one, because I'm like, okay, nothing like this exists where they grew a group and they're a therapist, definitely
Right.
not in Canada. Um, so I went through like four, we're picky. I think we're
Hmm.
particular picky people because we're in the
Hmm.
psychology field. So in the end, I found I wanted a mastermind with people who had made over seven figures on their own. I just felt lonely. And I loved that it was women at the time. Like I just wanted to be surrounded by like powerful women. And they were all like they were in different industries, but I didn't care. And it was amazing. I felt we all had a lot of the same issues, funny enough.
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting, the commonalities. Yeah. I wrestle with that sometimes. I've done a lot of coaching over the past several years too. And I wrestle with how much it should be folks, within our industry versus people who are outside of our industry. I think, both have been really beneficial to me. It's just where you're at in your journey and what you might need at that point in
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. This is good. Are there any resources, well, we'll just stick with that. Any resources around positive leadership or leadership tools in general that have been helpful for you that folks can check out?
Yes. The Culture Code. I'll
Mm,
put that in the show notes by
hmm.
Daniel Coyle. It is
Yes.
amazing. I would say it's the book to read
Hmm.
um, for anybody who's leading, even if you have one person. And he talks specifically, gives a lot of sports analogies, like basketball analogies, like
Yeah.
teams, sports teams that win. It's
Yes.
phenomenal. And the biggest takeaway, though, is connection. That it
Hmm.
actually doesn't matter that as much as we think to have games night. People always want to, they're always asking me, what do I do for culture? Games night, what else? Like this, trivia and like this thing and that thing, a book club. Not really. What actually matters is that you care, that they feel that you care, and that builds connection, and they will root for you and your vision. And the other big piece that I've learned kind of from the book, but also just working with 700 therapists and helping them all grow in the last 2 years is if you know their goal, their personal goal, their lifestyle goal and their career goal, and it can fit inside your bigger group practice goal, why would they ever leave? They
Hmm.
can grow and you will grow. But it's actually knowing and asking yourself, listeners, do you know Susie down the hall working right now? Do you know her lifestyle goal? You should.
I like that. Yeah, connection's what it's all about across the board. Yeah. It
Totally.
makes me think, um, I don't know if did you ever read the book Radical Candor?
Yes. Love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So the whole framework of that book is, if you need to give difficult feedback to someone, they have to know that you care and you have empathy for them. Right. And that is not built in 20 seconds when you come in and you're like, hey, I really care about you. Now let's do this hard
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Like you have to work at that over
Yeah.
time. And it's these little connecting moments and, getting to know folks and spending time with them. Yeah.
And thank goodness we're in the psychology field. Like by definition, we're good people, right? Like we studied them, we went to school for a long time. So I would say the best boss, our therapists. We're lucky.
I like that.
Typically with high EQ, right?
That's a nice positive way to frame it. Yes. So as we start to wrap up, I am a big fan of repetition to help people encode and, retain this information, right? So give me the 4 steps again, brief description of each, and then we'll start to fade out and let people
Perfect.
marinate on
Yeah.
this.
So positive leadership, that's the key. And it's really, rather than punishment and just writing them up, how do you actually influence them is meeting them where they're at and knowing that people want to do good. Just walking into the meeting knowing, okay, they actually want to make me happy. How do I connect with them in a way to get to the goal? Number one, get face to face. In person's even better. Jump in face to face and show up curious. And all of a sudden, they will not be defensive. Then you're going to get to the barrier. There's something there. If we think they want to get to the goal, then there's a barrier there and dig in. But it takes time to dig in. It takes connection and psychological safety for them to share. And then 3, get them to define the goal. They come up with it. Obviously, you're guiding them. The goal is the clean room. How do we get there? And then lastly is timeline. That's going to help with your anxiety, knowing like, okay, this will be solved soon. And if it's not, then there's bigger decisions to make.
Sounds great. That sounds great. Thank you. So you do a lot of work with folks. What if people want to work with you or just learn more? What's the best way to get in touch and check out what you've got going on?
Yes, I have a podcast, my podcast friends called The Business Savvy Therapist. You can find me there. I also have a free masterclass every single week, how to build a 7-figure group practice. It is free and I'll throw the link in the show notes.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Well, like I said at the beginning, thanks for reaching out and coming on. It was great to connect with you and hear some of these thoughts. And I think hopefully inspiring for folks to hear from someone on the other side of what
Yeah,
this is like. Yeah. So thanks,
awesome.
Nicole.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Always grateful to have you here. I hope that you take away some information that you can implement in your practice and in your life. Any resources that we mentioned during the episode will be listed in the show notes, so make sure to check those out. If you like what you hear on the podcast, I would be so grateful if you left a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're a practice owner or aspiring practice owner, I'd invite you to check out the Testing Psychologist mastermind groups. I have mastermind groups at every stage of practice development, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. We have homework, we have accountability, we have support, we have resources. These groups are amazing. We do a lot of work and a lot of connecting. If that sounds interesting to you, you can check out the details at thetestingpsychologist.com/consulting. You can sign up for a pre-group phone call and we will chat and figure out if a group could be a good fit for you. Thanks so much. The information contained in this podcast and on the Testing Psychologist website are intended for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing in this podcast or on the website is intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please note that no doctor-patient relationship is formed here, and similarly, no supervisory or consultative relationship is formed between the host or guests of this podcast and listeners of this podcast. If you need the qualified advice of any mental health practitioner or medical provider, please seek one in your area. Similarly, if you need supervision on clinical matters, please find a supervisor with an expertise that fits your needs.